Okay, good evening, everybody. I said I promised I'll start at 5 past, so I will try to do so. Probably a slightly redundant question. I assume everyone can hear me okay. But if there are any issues during the talk with the screen sharing or the audio, please just pop a message in the chat. I'll keep one eye on that. Just let me know if there are any issues. So thank you for coming today. So my name is Matt, and I'm here to talk to you about renting in the private sector. I'm a Durham graduate myself, and I'm director of a unique renters platform called Get My Deposits Back. My aim really is to demystify the formal legal language in your tenancy agreement and ensure that you avoid unreasonable deductions from your security deposit. Your president, Diana, is also going to talk to you about the support available to Eustinovians, hopefully I've pronounced that correctly, who live out of college. So, very brief agenda today. So, those are the main two areas that we're going to talk about. So we'll start with the common terms in your tenancy agreement. Now, to really, I guess, pull things back to a basic level, we can ask, I guess, what is a tenancy agreement? And this is quite an important term to understand, as many of you have likely already signed one. So a tenancy agreement sets out who the tenants are, who the landlord is, when the tenancy starts and ends, and your obligations to each other. It is a legal contract, so it does need to be treated with due respect. And breaching a tenancy agreement, for example, through excessive noise or other antisocial behaviour, can lead to very expensive county court claims being made against all the tenants, and possibly even the eviction from the property. Now, you likely signed your tenancy agreement some months ago in some cases. If so, please do ensure that you do read it again and ensure that you understand what it says before you actually move into the property. So the type of tenancy that I'm going to be covering today is called an assured short hold tenancy, which again, it's one of these horrible legalese terms. Sometimes abbreviated as an AST. And I've got a couple of poll questions I want to run by you guys as we go through today. I'm going to start with one already, if that's okay with everyone. So the first question I want to put to you all, hopefully this is working, is as far as you're aware, is your tenancy or a tenancy that you've been in the past an assured short hold tenancy? Yes, no, or you're not sure? I'll just give a few moments for the answers to pop through. So a few more seconds. Okay, so just to share results on that. So I think it just got one person voting in. So essentially, if you look at the first page of your tenancy agreement, it should say what type of tenancy you have. So perhaps like the example here on screen, just bring this up. Your tenancy, this is a quite standard form that a tenancy agreement can take, and it's right up there at the top in big bold letters. So yours may well be the same. And actually, the majority of postgraduate students and undergraduates as well here in Durham will have an AST. It's just it's the default type of tenancy contract that you will get in England and Wales. Now, one of the key things with an AST is it gives very specific legal rights, both to the landlord, but also to yourself as a tenant. But I guess perhaps an obvious question at this point, given we're just trying to keep things basic for the moment, is what even is a landlord? So a landlord is any person who rents out a property that they own. In exchange for receiving your rent, the landlord will take on a lot of legal responsibilities to you. One of them is that the landlord is responsible for most repairs in the property, and they must ensure that the property is safe and fit to live in at all times for their tenants. Their responsibilities to repair will include things like the electrical wiring, electrical sockets, and any gas pipe work, appliances that provide heating and or hot water to the property. So I'm thinking of things here like the boiler, chimneys or any other sources of ventilation in the property are also the landlord's responsibility to maintain and repair. Also any sinks, baths, toilets, and all the pipe work and drains, essentially all the plumbing and drainage in the property is also the landlord's responsibility to maintain and repair. Further, the structure of the building and its rooms, so thinking of things like the roof, internal and external walls, stairs, banisters, windows, etc. They're all the landlord's responsibility. Finally, things like mold or damp issues, and also if you have any issues, if you were unfortunately to have any issues with vermin such as mice or rats, they would all be the landlord's responsibility. I think you get the idea. The landlord's responsibilities to you as a tenant are actually very broad. Essentially, almost anything that was there when you moved in is the landlord's responsibility to fix, because it's their house, so the landlord is still responsible for its upkeep. And crucially, the landlord must carry out its repairs as quickly as possible. Now, some landlords will appoint an estate agent to manage the property and resolve any issues on their behalf. This may be a landlord that's got a whole portfolio of properties, and they don't have the time to get involved in the nitty-gritty, and will just pay an estate agent to do that management for them. But one thing I want to get across here today is no matter what the agent may tell you, the landlord is always responsible for all of the above issues I've just talked about. And coming back to my statement at the start, ensuring your home is safe and fit to live in at all times, because that's what you're paying for at the end of the day as a tenant. So if an issue does arise and you find that perhaps the agent isn't being cooperative, you can also contact the landlord directly in writing and maybe just politely remind them that they are the person responsible for sorting this out, and that may just get things moving for you. It's important to note that even if the property is managed by a letting agent, you are still entitled to know the contact details of the landlord. So again, just trying to keep things straightforward to start with, at least. We can ask, I guess, what is a tenant? So a tenant is any person who rents from a landlord. Tenants are expected to use the property in a reasonable manner at all times. So this includes keeping the inside and outside reasonably clean and tidy, and ensure that you take reasonable care of the property itself, changing smoke alarm batteries or light bulbs as needed, and also ensuring that your own electrical appliances are safe. Beyond that, any other repairs or maintenance are almost certainly the landlord's responsibility. Now, as we know, the landlord is responsible for fixing lots of these issues that arise, but your responsibility is to make sure that you report the issue to the landlord as soon as possible. And actually this makes sense, because the landlord can't fix something that he or she doesn't know is broken. So just make sure issues are reported quickly and always in writing. And I think email is good for that. If you do have an agent, it depends on what they're like, but I've generally always copied the landlord into any email raising an issue with the property, as well as when I email the estate agent, because then the landlord can't claim that they weren't aware of the problem. And this should also ensure that you are actually prioritised by the agent, because the landlord can frankly sack them if they aren't properly managing the property. Your tenancy agreement may also set out additional responsibilities for either yourself or your landlord that I haven't already covered today. For example, your landlord may be responsible for repairs to other appliances that came with the property. So things like the ovens, showers, or washing machines. They may have signed up in the tenancy agreement to also repair and maintain those appliances. Now, this one's quite a sensitive topic, and I think it's very important to know what your rights are here. So, as a tenant, the property is your home, and there are very strict restrictions on when the landlord can enter the property during the tenancy. This is often called protecting your right to quiet enjoyment of the property. Now, the law is very complex in this area, and I'm not a lawyer, so I can't give a complete treatment or give legal advice on this particular topic, or any topic for that matter. However, according to Housing Charity Shelter, who I highly recommend if you do have any issues with your property, in most cases, the landlord needs to give you at least 24 hours written notice if they or their representative wish to access the property. Now, generally speaking, the landlord cannot just turn up and let themselves in without having given you that sufficient notice. Your tenancy agreement may even stipulate the minimum notice period required for landlord access. But as I said here, I think where possible, you should try to allow access where it's convenient for you, where it's possible for you. So your landlord can then meet their legal obligations to keep your home safe. So, for example, you probably do want to let their engineer, who's going to carry out your annual gas safety check, into the property to carry out that check, because that keeps you safe. Now, in the event of an emergency, the landlord or their trade person is allowed to enter the property at very short notice, less than 24 hours. However, they should still make a mutually convenient appointment with you beforehand, and shouldn't just be turning up without notice unless it's very exceptional circumstances. And I mean, again, this is up to you, but if the time they want to arrive is going to cause significant issues for you, then you can suggest an alternative date and time, but just bear in mind that this may delay the repair itself. Again, it's just often in your best interests to let any emergency repair work be carried out as soon as possible. However, if the landlord or any of their representatives, so their estate agent or any of their tradespeople, if they're entering your home without permission, or they keep turning up unannounced at your door, this may amount to harassment. And this is just a line that they shouldn't cross. Now, if you have any concerns about possible harassment from your landlord, then I would strongly suggest maybe contacting the welfare team at USANOV, or also contacting an external organisation such as Shelter, or even a solicitor. It's a very complex area, and it's obviously a very sensitive subject. But harassment's a very serious issue, and you have the right to be protected from harassment, and you have the right not to be harassed in your home. So hopefully that's not something that will ever happen to any of you, but I think it's important to know that you have those routes and support there should you need it. Now, this is quite a common term that you may come across in some tenancies, not all, but some, is this idea of a joint tenant. So some people will just rent on a single tenant basis, and on that basis, you are only responsible for your own rent and your own damages. But joint tenants, no matter how many there are in the property, are generally treated as a single entity. So there could be 2 joint tenants, there could be 20 joint tenants. You're all treated as a single entity. And each joint tenant is equally liable for all of the rent that is due and any damage caused to the property by any tenant. So if one tenant perhaps decided not to pay their rent, the other tenants are both individually and collectively liable for that shortfall. Again, hopefully that's not something that will happen to any of you, but I think it's important to know that you all essentially share equal liability for rent and damages if you are joint tenants. Now, from my own experience, this is just more of an admin point really. I found it very useful to have a joint email address that all joint tenants will have access to whilst we were living in the property. And that's an address that you can provide to the landlord or agent, and also the energy company, your internet provider, etc., as your main point of contact. This main reason being this should make your lives easier, and it also avoids you getting marketing spam from the estate agent once you leave in your existing personal email accounts. You can keep them nice and hopefully keep them clean, and just let all that spam go to this address that once you've moved out, you won't use anymore. So I think a summary of just that, of what I've just covered so far already. We've talked about what a tenancy agreement is, what a landlord and tenant are, some of their responsibilities to each other, some rules around the landlord's access to the property, and the concept of joint tenants. Now, there will be time for questions at the end, and I know we've already had one comment in the chat. Just on that point, if there is something you wanted to discuss with either myself or with the Usnov exec after the call, maybe just let Diana know, and she can pass on my contact details, and I can see if I can provide what support I can. But yes, generally I will make sure that there is time for questions at the end. Okay, so the next section then, we've kind of hopefully covered a few of the basics. I want to talk to you about security deposits. So, and you can probably guess this is something that's one of my main focuses, given my company's called Get My Deposit Back. And so I think, so I think this is the most important section of this talk, and I will show you why shortly. So in addition to your upcoming rent, each of you have handed over many hundreds of pounds to the landlord as a security deposit, and you will not be able to get any of this money back until the tenancy has ended. However, and this is the first fact that I really want to impress onto all of you, throughout your tenancy, under law, that money is still yours. I realise you can't access it, but it is still your money. It's basically it gets ring-fenced and protected. Well, that's the idea. That's one of the things I'm going to come on to. And importantly, the landlord can only access this money by successfully raising a damages claim against you once the tenancy is ended. There is a general assumption, I guess, along less well-informed landlords, that deposit money is kind of theirs really, and it's something. Some will even see it as a redecoration fund once you move out. And they're just part and parcel of having tenancies. Once you move out, right? I'm going to need to redecorate now, and you're going to pay for that. And it really doesn't work like that at all. But there are some landlords who hold that belief. So what is a security deposit actually for then? Well, it's basically a sum of money paid at the start of the tenancy to the landlord, as you know. This pot of money is put towards any damages caused by the tenant during the tenancy. Importantly, within 30 calendar days, not 30 working days or anything like that, 30 calendar days of receiving the deposit money from you, the landlord must register and protect your security deposit with one of the 3 government-approved deposit protection agencies. Now, in England and Wales, these are the Deposit Protection Service, the Tenancy Deposit Scheme, and My Deposits. The money should not be going to any other organisation. So given many of you probably signed your tenancy agreements for the next year more than 30 days ago, in some cases at least, and the landlord has only 30 calendar days to actually protect it, your deposit should already have been protected. So for example, if you signed your tenancy agreement and paid your deposit to the landlord on the 12th of January this year, the landlord must have protected all of it, not some of it, the whole thing, by the 11th of February of this year. So that's a very, very tight, it's a very clear deadline, and it can't be breached, essentially. But what happens if the landlord does miss their deadline? Now, all landlords are human beings, and even the most well-intentioned human beings make mistakes. One organisation said last year, in the midst of a pandemic, granted, that it believes around 15% of all deposits taken by landlords are not protected. Another organisation actually believes this figure could be as high as 24%. So you're talking almost 1 in 4 deposits taken by landlords are not being protected. Now, obviously, it's hard to know exactly how many are not being protected unless that's being reported. So it's a little difficult to know exactly how many, but I think either way, there are certainly, from the research I've done, there are some landlords, too many, frankly, who aren't protecting deposits as they should and putting their tenants' own money at risk. And actually, I can even vouch for this because I once rented a property where my deposit wasn't protected. Now, fortunately, I got it all back after tenancy ended, but not everyone's that lucky. Some tenants may find that their landlord stops answering calls or responding to emails, and essentially disappears when their tenancy has ended. Now, if their deposit wasn't protected, they will likely never see that deposit money again. So protection of deposits is something I feel very, very strongly about. Now, in addition to protecting the deposit, the landlord must also provide you with prescribed information about your deposit within the same 30 calendar day deadline. This is just something that's required under the law. So this is what counts as prescribed information is the property address, which you should hopefully know, given you're going to be renting there. The deposit paid, how the deposit was protected, the name and contact details of the deposit protection scheme used, the landlord or agent's name and their contact details. Also, if any third party paid the deposit on behalf of the tenant, then their contact details must also be provided. Under what circumstances the landlord would apply to keep some or all of the deposit. Usually it'll state things like because of damage caused by the tenant. Also the process and how the tenant should apply to get the deposit back, and what to do if you can't get hold of the landlord at the end of the tenancy, because if it's been protected and you can't get hold of the landlord at the end of the tenancy, the money will just be returned to you. So that's one of the reasons why protection of deposits is so important. And finally, what to do if there is a dispute over deposit deductions, which does happen. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon that deposit deductions requested by the landlord can be unreasonable. We'll come on to that a bit more a bit later on. Now that's quite a lot of shoulds. So what if the landlord didn't protect your deposit within 30 days and provide you with this prescribed information? What if all this has not happened? Now, I said at the start, this is probably the most important section of this talk. So what happens if the landlord breaches that 30-day deadline? Well, if they did breach it, then you are entitled to up to 3 times the deposit amount back as compensation. So we're likely talking over £1,000 per tenant if the landlord has messed up here. And this is quite a formal legal process, and it's essentially a big checklist of things they have to do. And unfortunately for landlords, if they miss any of them, then this compensation is due. And it sounds quite a steep amount, but the reason is because protection of deposits is so important, and the tenant's money is what gets put at risk if the landlord isn't doing what they should. So this is essentially a penalty on the landlord, and a big stick, if you will, to hopefully make sure that they don't forget to protect the deposit and do so within 30 days. But some landlords don't, and some of you here today may well be in this position. It's also important to know that there are circumstances where a landlord must re-protect a deposit during a tenancy. The protection can expire during a tenancy. So even if it was protected at the start, it may not still be protected now. So whether you're about to rent next year for the very first time, having already signed a tenancy agreement and paid a deposit, whether you're renting at the moment or you've started a tenancy at, broadly speaking, at any time in the last 6 years, you may be entitled to that amount of compensation if the landlord has broken the law. So you're probably getting an idea of what my view on all this is so far. But do landlords really make this error? Well, there's a popular landlord blog online that if you want to hear what a landlord's perspective is on renting in general and tenants and tenancies and what the law is, it's quite illuminating to actually understand and hear, you know, their side of things. And this one of the blog posts on this blog, it gives a landlord's perspective on your right to have your deposit protected. Now, perhaps surprisingly, they're quite hostile towards the whole concept of protection of deposits, or certainly the idea of you being fined so substantially for not doing it. This is just an extract of some of the wording that I found on this blog. So this person, who is a landlord themselves, said, there's a good chance your tenant isn't aware of the tenancy deposit legislation or the ramifications for failing to comply. You don't want to give your tenant a reason to look into the legislation or exercise their right to claim compensation. Now, when I read that, I think it was just clear to me that that landlord's focus is entirely on avoiding the tenant becoming aware of their right to a protected deposit and compensation. In my view, the focus should be on why it wasn't protected, as it should be. Like, that's the more important question. That's why the compensation here is so substantial, because this is so important. But this being a landlord blog, they just focus solely on that penalty and essentially trying to ensure that the wool remains pulled over their tenants' eyes so that they aren't called to account for not doing something they're supposed to do. Now, this takes us to what I've got as our interactive section, and hopefully this works. We'll give this a go. We're going to do a live check for any of you who have paid a deposit to check if your deposit is protected right now. So the information that we need for this is actually that information that I mentioned at the start, which I've just listed here again. So it's the tenancy start date, the property postcode, the deposit amount, the surname of a lead tenant, and the deposit ID if you know that, but you won't necessarily know that. So there's 3 websites, one for each of these schemes, and they each have a deposit checking service on their site. Now, I realize probably you can't click on those links that are on there, so I'm just going to paste the web addresses into the chat window now. And Dan, if you'd be able to just copy and paste that information over to the YouTube, over to the guys on YouTube as well, so that they can see that. They can then get access to these web addresses. So if you just click on each one in turn, if you already know which one yours is protected with, then maybe this is, you don't need to go to all 3. But if you're not sure, here's where they all are. And if you can't find your details under one of the schemes, try the other 2. Also, if you prefer to just Google the name of each scheme yourself and find the right page, that way, then please feel free to do so. You don't have to use these links. So just, if you're doing that, just look out for a section called something like check if my deposit is protected with you, or something along those lines. Either way, I'll just give you 10 minutes now to have a short break and hopefully check your deposit details with the 3 schemes and hopefully find that your deposit is protected. If anyone does have any difficulties, then please message me in the chat window. And if anyone can't find a record of their deposit with any of these 3 schemes, then please also message us in the chat window. If you could provide your email address as well. And then the college and I will advise you further on what to do next after this call is over. So I will leave it out for that 10-minute break. If you want to just go and get a drink as well, if you've already done your deposit check, then that's great. But yeah, I'll see you guys back at 7:45. Hi there, everyone. Right, so hopefully you've all had a chance to check that your deposit is protected. I've just given my Facebook page on the chat there, just in case anyone does want to, does need to contact me separately after having gone through all that today. So that's hopefully your deposit is protected, hopefully. The other thing to check, I guess, really here now is whether you have received all of the prescribed information. Now, you can easily check this by looking back over any paperwork you received when you agreed to the tenancy. So basically, just if you check your emails, the information should be there. Upon successful protection of the deposit, the scheme will provide the landlord with a certificate, and it may be that the landlord's just forwarded that on to you. Now that will likely contain some, but usually not all of the required information. So if you've been, if you've been sent that certificate, then great. But it alone doesn't necessarily mean the landlord has met their obligations on prescribed information. So, to summarise that little section, so a security deposit is a sum of money paid at the start of the tenancy to the landlord. It is your money until the landlord successfully makes a claim for some or all of it. Once you pay the deposit, the landlord has 30 calendar days to protect it with a government-approved scheme and provide you with your prescribed information. Otherwise, you are entitled to, it's usually around 1 to 3 times your deposit back as compensation. To get the full 3 times, I think the landlord has to have been particularly bad. It does happen, but it's in that range, usually between 1 to 3 times your deposit. Either way, it's a lot of money. And I will just note one more thing there. It's if you were to find that your deposit hadn't been protected and then was protected maybe at some point during the tenancy, but done so late, you don't have to raise a claim straight away. It might be the case that you are better off waiting until the tenancy is finished before you raise your claim. It all depends on circumstances. But that could be a really nice bit of leverage for you that may mean that the landlord doesn't even try and take any deposit money from you. It's just one of those things to bear in mind. He may well know that he or she may well know that you're in a very strong position if they've protected that deposit too late. But yes, as I say, if your landlord has broken the law, then please do send us a message in the chat window with your email address or email the college separately. You can also contact me on by my Facebook page. So that's facebook.com/getmydepositback, all one word. If you just Google Facebook Get My Deposit Back, you should be able to find my page there, or if not, just search for it on Facebook and you should find me there. Now, at this point, Dan, if that's okay, I'd just like to pass to you we had a couple of bits of signposting that you wanted to do. I'll just bring that slide up.
Hi, everyone. So basically, you will have information or support from university. Of course, there is this, then the left side, you will see the first one. It's about, it's done by university services. There is the Durham SU, which is another group. And the last one is from the government, and in the right side you will see that there is another type of support. So if it's not related to housing matters, or you're having problems with your landlord that is causing you stress or having some mental welfare, you can also get some support from them. So the first one is from the university services, which is the counseling service. And the second one is from college, because if you're used enough, basically you will get the support from college. You can contact them over there. And we have also our welfare officer or our live out rep. So, I mean, officer, who both of them can help you with anything that you might need. That's it from me. Thank you, Matthew.
Brilliant. Thanks, Diana. Thanks for that. Okay, so we're into the last section of today's talk. So assuming that you now know the landlord has complied with the law and your deposit is properly protected, I will finish by explaining how to improve your chances of getting your full security deposit back after you move out. Now, for context, around a third of all tenancies will end with deposit deductions by the landlord on average. So I'm not saying 1 in 3 of you will experience that same thing, but just across the UK, on average, around 1 in 3 of all tenancies end with some money being taken by the landlord, whether fairly or not. So the first thing to say is look after the property, as careless damage can lead to substantial deductions. However, beyond that, I think that's probably all that really needs to be said about that bit. My focus today really is going to be on how to avoid those unreasonable deductions from your deposit. As the research I've done has shown, many students actually find themselves facing unreasonable deposit deductions. So there are some key, in my view, anyway, this is what I propose to you all. There are some key steps to take on the first day of your tenancy, and then again on the last day of your tenancy under this process. Now, for those already in a tenancy, you can still significantly improve your chances of getting your full deposit back by still following the advice just for the last day of your tenancy. So we'll start with day one. You've just got the keys for the property. You're finally moving into your new home. When you move in, you should be given a lot of things, including the following: your keys to the property, obviously, the latest gas safety certificate, and also the latest electrical safety certificate, and the landlord's version of the inventory or check-in report. And that's just a written record of the condition of the property at the start of the tenancy. Now, firstly, I strongly suggest taking a photo of all of these things on your phone and emailing them to yourself on the day that you move in. Because sometimes it's not unheard of that landlords can falsely claim they have given you some additional set of keys and then charge you for them when they aren't returned a year later. If that were to happen to you, then your email sent on the day you moved in would be great evidence against such an unreasonable claim. Now, that inventory or checking report, I'll just call it an inventory from here, is the most important document you will receive from the landlord if you want to get your deposit back. In deposit disputes, the inventory is often taken as the gospel truth regarding the condition of the property at the outset. Standard practice by some landlords, well, I'll just take an aside here at the moment. I don't want to give the impression that I think all landlords are terrible. That isn't the case. There are plenty of great landlords. I've rented from great landlords, but there is a bit of a practice amongst some landlords and some estate agents where they will prepare an inventory for you that they give you, which maybe just gives quite a positive view, I guess, a positive spin on the condition of the property. So it's just something to watch for. I'll come on to this a bit more in a second. But where they've done the inventory, they'll likely do a checkout report as well when you move out. And where both documents were prepared by the landlord or the agent without any correction or alternative evidence provided by the tenant, the landlord will often win at adjudication, no matter how unreasonable the deposit deduction is. That inventory at the start, it is really taken as gospel. It's in writing. Adjudicators love that because they can very quickly see what they need. If you're relying just on photos, it can be difficult for the adjudicator to quickly work out what the condition was at the start and the end. They like a written record as well. So don't ignore that inventory. As I said, I think that there is a bit of a practice, maybe especially where estate agents are used for the inventory, to pretend the property is in better condition than it is. But you'll then find, and I've absolutely experienced this, the checkout report that's done at the end of your tenancy will then go into like forensic detail on every little scratch, mark or chip and blame the tenant for every single one of them. That's why you need to be careful and just make sure that inventory at the start is accurate. So, I mean, this is more of a warning. I'm not guaranteeing that you will experience this. This is more of a warning that you may experience the same thing. So time and time again, when I was rented, as I say, I was caught up in this dubious process. And from the research I've done, many other Durham students have been as well. In one of the cases I had, for me personally, at the outset, the landlord exaggerated the condition of the property or was otherwise just vague. So they'd say something like, there'd be a whole page for a particular bedroom, and it'd just say, bedroom with carpet, painted walls and curtains. And that's it. And that just, unfortunately, the implication there is that everything's in great condition. I even had one landlord claim to me that there was a new kitchen door in the property. Yet when we moved in, there wasn't actually a door at all, and no door ever appeared. Yet when we moved out, the checkout report claimed that we had removed the door, like that we damaged it and had thrown it away. And the landlord tried to charge us for a new one. Fortunately, that claim didn't go anywhere. But no matter how ridiculous some of these claims can appear, it doesn't mean a landlord won't try it on. So it's just imperative that you read that inventory carefully. It's not challenging any errors could likely cost you hundreds of pounds per tenant when you move out. So because of that, I make no apologies that my suggested process here requires a bit of time and a bit of effort from all tenants as early as possible on the day that you move in. I think half an hour should do, and then probably another half an hour on the last day of the tenancy, if you all work together. But until the law changes to kind of cut out this quite sharp practice, this is just part and parcel of renting in 2021. Now, if all this kind of puts you off, it all sounds a bit too much, or it's going to sound a bit too much as I go through it, let me just first say this. If anyone has a job where they can earn anything close to a few £100s for 1 hour's work, then please let me and everyone else know, as I will certainly change careers. The return on your time here is significant, or it's likely to be significant anyway. If you just treat this process as a job in itself, and you can't really go far wrong. So my suggested process to protect yourself from unreasonable deposit deductions is to do the following on day one. Now, the emptier the property, the easier it is to inspect it quickly. So when you arrive, just drop off your bags in the property, and then if there's a few of you all moving in at the same time, have a tenant who has good handwriting, grab the inventory, and a pen in one hand, and maybe then ideally another tenant can just have their phone. If you're a sole tenant, then maybe see if a friend can help with this part. All grab your keys and all step outside the property, close the front door. Now, starting from your front door, the tenants should annotate the inventory to record any scratches, damage, stains, wear, etc. Go room by room, as the landlord has, and don't forget to check inside things like the oven and any outdoor space or garden too. You don't need to comment on everything that looks great. Just focus on anything that has any damage or stains, etc. and briefly record the issue. So, for example, carpet has large black stain in middle, fridge shelves are greasy, damp on wall nearest the shower, grass mostly dead, only few patches alive, etc. A little succinct few words like that can certainly paint a picture. Then have the tenant with the phone then take a photo of every dirty or damaged or not new item either the landlord or you have now recorded in the inventory. A zoomed out photo from each corner of an empty room is also advisable and should only take you a few seconds. Ensure the photos are time-stamped. And taking both photos and having a written record is important, as many landlords will have both in their checkout report. So you want both in your inventory, or at least in your records on the day you move in. And an accurate inventory severely hinders unreasonable landlord deductions. Now, when you're done, take photos of your annotated inventory as well. This is now the definitive version of the inventory and should supersede the landlord's earlier version. If you have time to type it up, then that would be great. But if your handwriting is clearly legible, then you can just submit it as it is, but just submit it quickly. Your photos of the property should also be backed up should the worst happen to your phone. And finally, email that to the landlord. Your property photos, I think, are for your records really at this stage. So it's probably best not to share those with the landlord at the outset. You can probably just save them until you move out and should any unreasonable deductions be sought. Now, the landlord will very likely just accept the new definitive inventory without further comment. It is extremely rare for the landlord or agent to re-inspect the property again. But if they do, then you can just show them the issues that you've spotted. Worst comes to worst, if both parties cannot agree on a final definitive inventory, then that is more of a problem for the landlord than it is for you. Don't feel pressured into compromising on your opinion of the property's condition. Also, I advise taking photos of your gas, electricity and water meter readings on the day you move in as well, because then you can share those with the various utility companies. It's kind of a good proof should there be a dispute over meter readings. You don't want to end up paying hundreds of pounds of extra electricity or gas that the previous tenants used but didn't pay for. Just make, if you take those pictures on day one, and that shows what the meter was on that day, because that's when you started to become liable for those utility bills. Now, you are often given a very tight timescale to provide amendments to the inventory. Cynically, you could say that's maybe in the hope that you won't bother by giving you so little time to do it. But I think in reality, it's because it's supposed to reflect condition on day one. So if you're providing amendments a month later, it gets a bit hard to justify, well, actually, is that the condition of the property a month later, or was it the condition on day one? So, but if you've been following this process, given your work is best done on day one anyway, then you shouldn't actually have too much trouble emailing over your definitive inventory quickly. Also, I'll say it doesn't matter if the landlord check-in was done with you present or not. If you decide after the landlord leaves or after the agent leaves that you want to amend the inventory that they've prepared, then amend it. It's your document as well, and it will be crucial come the end of your tenancy. Now, I promised some more quiz questions for you all. I'm aware the guys on YouTube obviously won't be able to see the quiz questions, but I'll promise I'll read out what all the possible answers are, so you can maybe just participate in your head, unfortunately. Because basically we're now about to, that's day one done. At that point now you can just go on and enjoy your new home. And we're about to now move all the way to the end of your tenancy. So my first question on this section is, at the end of your tenancy, should the tenant leave the property in the same condition as it was when you moved in, the same condition it was when you moved in after allowing for fair use or wear and tear, or as required in the tenancy agreement contract? Just give you a moment or two just to pop your answers in there. Perhaps for the guys on YouTube again, just as a reminder, so it's at the end of the tenancy, should the tenant leave the property in the same condition as it was when you moved in the same condition as it was when you moved in, after allowing for fair use or wear and tear, or as required in the tenancy agreement contract. Okay, so I will end that poll now. So I'm delighted to say that all of you are correct. So yes, the correct answer is B. It's in the same condition as it was when you moved in, after allowing for fair use or wear and tear. You wouldn't believe how many landlords don't know that. And actually this makes sense, because you're essentially saying it needs to be the same condition as it was when you moved in, but with say a year's use of the property factored in, and that sounds fair. And that's all that the law requires. My next question, got a couple of them here, is according to the Tenancy Deposit Scheme, who are one of the 3 government-approved deposit schemes for England and Wales, what is the most common deposit deduction sought by landlords? Is it cleaning, removing rubbish from the property, or rectifying damage to the property? So again, according to the Tenancy Deposit Scheme, what is the most common deposit deduction sought by landlords? Is it cleaning, removing rubbish from the property, or rectifying damage to the property? Let's give you a few more seconds on that one. Okay, so we've got a split on this one. Half said cleaning, half said rectifying damage to the property. So the correct answer is cleaning, according to the Tenancy Deposit Scheme anyway, who from the cases that come to them, 42% of deductions sought by landlords are for cleaning. But actually, damage to the property came in at 41%, so just 1% lower. So I think both answers are fine, essentially. So cleaning and damage to the property, those are very, very common deductions sought by the landlord. So if the inventory greatly exaggerates the cleanliness of the property on day one, and this was not contested, then you will likely lose a chunk of your deposit to cleaning should the landlord make a claim for it. And just bear in mind, typical cleaning bills are often around something like £150. So it's not a small amount of money that will be taken from your deposit. Next poll question. My tenancy agreement says that I must ensure the property is professionally cleaned at the end of the tenancy. Must I pay for a professional cleaner? Yes or no? So that's my tenancy agreement says I must ensure the property is professionally cleaned at the end of the tenancy. Must I pay for a professional cleaner? Yes or no? Just as an aside, that's a fairly common term that you will find in tenancy agreements. So this may be relevant to many of you. Okay, so we'll just end the poll there. So I'll just get this one shared. So you all said no, and you're all correct. So, and the reason why is in that important statement earlier. You are only required to return the property in the same condition it was at the start after allowing for fair wear and tear. It doesn't matter what the tenancy agreement says, the law overrides the tenancy agreement, and you don't have to leave it any cleaner than it was when you moved in. It's as simple as that. Okay, this is the last poll question now, I promise. It's essentially the same question, just with a slight twist. It says, so my tenancy agreement says that I must ensure the property is professionally cleaned at the end of the tenancy, but now to the same standard it was when I moved in. So essentially entirely in line with the law. This would cost me £150. Must I pay for a professional cleaner? So again, the question is, my tenancy agreement says I must ensure the property is professionally cleaned at the end of the tenancy to the same standard it was when I moved in. So entirely in line with the law. This will cost £150. Must I pay for a professional cleaner? Yes or no? Okay, so just end the poll there. And again, you all said no, and again, you're all absolutely right. So, and this again, this can be a fairly common issue. This is the landlord here. I guess this may be a case where the landlord may even insist that you need to have a professional cleaner because that's what the tenancy agreement says, or because it's just to the same standard it was when you moved in. And you may feel that you have to pay for this. But the landlord would be wrong in that case. Because as I keep coming back to, your only requirement is to return the property in the same state it was at the start of the tenancy, after allowing for fair use or wear and tear. And as you all seem to already know that, so that's great. Key thing here is it doesn't matter how you achieve that. So the tenants can do the cleaning themselves before they move out and save themselves a substantial sum of money, or they could pay for a professional cleaner. The choice is theirs, but they don't have to use the professional cleaner. They can do it themselves if they want to. Of course, if things aren't as clean as they were when you move out than when it was when you moved in, and the landlord can probably make a reasonable deposit deduction for cleaning. There is one exception here that I should just say, that if you have pets, then you may need to have the property professionally cleaned, because you may need professional cleaning equipment to achieve that required standard of the properties in the same condition as it was before you moved in. You may struggle to do that yourself. Okay, well, thanks for participating in those polls, guys, and yeah, you've all did really well there, so that's great news. Okay, so like I said, we're turning to the last day of your tenancy, final day. It's a year later, it's the final day of your tenancy, you're all packed and you're ready to go. The last thing you should do is take that same half an hour again as before, and get out your day one photographs and take the same photographs again. Because these will then be your final day photographs, and they will be invaluable when it comes to defending against unreasonable deposit claims alongside the inventory, alongside your day one photos. And again, make a backup of these pictures that you take should the worst happen to your phone. All sorted. So you followed the advice given today, and you left the property in the same state as it was when you moved in, after allowing for fair use or wear and tear. You took supporting photos before you left, meaning you have great evidence of the condition of the property at the start and at the end of the tenancy. You're home and dry, and should now get your full deposit back. Well, sort of. There's one last wrinkle. I'm calling this final day plus one. With some deposits and some landlords, they can actually go silent once you move out and hold on to your entire deposit for a long time after the tenancy has ended. So you could find yourself moving out and then find you don't hear anything further from the landlord, and there may not even be say there's no checkout report forthcoming. This would leave you substantially out of pocket waiting for your deposit to be returned. But there's a way to tackle this. So my advice is the day after you move out, final day plus one, or I guess shortly thereafter, but let's say final day plus one, call the deposit protection scheme and request the return of your deposit. You will either need to log into your account with the protection scheme and request repayment that way, or maybe contact the landlord in writing. Again, email is good, and request the return of your deposit that way. But either way, the Deposit Protection Scheme helpline will be able to tell you what you need to do for your type of deposit. And whichever applies, this will start a clock ticking for the landlord, as they only then have 10 days to contact you and set out what deductions they want and why. If they miss that deadline, the full deposit is just returned to you with no further fuss. There's no, the landlord goes silent and they're hanging onto your hundreds of pounds for weeks and months on end. So you do that, but wait, a few days later, you receive a checkout report from the landlord, finally, that blames you for all existing damage or dirt in the property on day one. And they want hundreds of pounds from your deposit. Is it time to worry? You provided that inventory when you moved in, so they know you know that the condition of the property wasn't perfect, far from it when you moved in. Is it time to worry? No, it's not time to worry. Because with your corrections to the inventory at the outset, your day one photos and your final day photos, you are in a very strong position. Unless the deduction is reasonable, e.g. you did leave the oven dirtier than it was at the outset, the landlord is unlikely to get his hands on any of your deposits. The best thing to do would be to speak to the deposit scheme helpline about what the deadlines are that you need to work to and submit your evidence when required. So maybe in that first call, final day +1, just ask them, should we need to go through the adjudication process, what deadlines apply? Because there are quite strict deadlines on with each. I think they can differ scheme by scheme, but there are very strict deadlines on when you need to submit evidence or ask for them or raise a dispute. Okay. I guess another thing to say is just always make sure that you're professional in correspondence with the landlord or agent. Again, just to speak personally, just for a moment, when I moved out of a property a few years ago, the landlord saw unreasonable deductions from me and said in one of their emails that if you wish to contest these deductions, please do so with my deposits. That's the scheme that it was with. And this was wrong, because upon receiving an unreasonable deposit deduction claim, tenants are supposed to first respond to the landlord directly before a deposit dispute is raised with the protection scheme. Had we gone with the agent's advice and gone straight to the scheme, we may then have struggled at adjudication. But fortunately, I knew not to take legal advice from the landlord's estate agent, and I did reply with my comments to their deductions directly. So, however pointless this step may seem if the landlord's being unreasonable, it is essential to respond directly to the landlord at first with a written rebuttal. Again, email is good, to any unreasonable deductions from your deposit, and to do so quickly. When corresponding with the landlord, as I say, be professional. The adjudicator will want to see this correspondence, so let the landlord be the one who's losing their rag by email. So you've responded, say you're in this unfortunate position, the landlord's making unreasonable demands on your deposit. You've responded to say, you know, see the inventory start. I've got photos to prove that the condition wasn't any worse when I moved out, or something like that. Basically, tell the landlord to go packing with their claim, basically. But they won't back down, even after your rebuttal, or they just go silent. You need to then escalate the dispute to adjudication. And like I said before, always ensure you do so within the deposit scheme's own deadline. Now, I've used the term adjudication a few times here without actually defining it. So adjudication is where both parties submit their evidence to the scheme. The independent adjudicator will then decide what to award the landlord, if anything. It's usually your first chance to have a fair hearing of your evidence, and the decision is usually binding. The adjudicator will not visit the property, so their decision is wholly based on the evidence submitted to them. And also ensure that you meet all of the deposit scheme's deadlines, or the landlord's claim, however unreasonable, will likely succeed. And as noted here, that over 80% of claims that have gone to adjudication are partially or fully upheld in the tenant's favour. It is, which I think, that's over 4 in 5 claims that landlords have made have been either partially or completely thrown out and rejected by the adjudicator. And I think it just shows that there are many landlords who do try it on with excessive deductions. And it's only when you get to adjudication that you have a fair hearing. So to summarise, let's just go back a bit here. My suggested process is as follows: that there are key steps to take on the first day of your tenancy and the last day of your tenancy to protect your deposit from unreasonable deductions. On day one, start from your front door, take your keys, step outside, close that front door, then go room by room, annotate on the inventory as required. Don't forget to check outside spaces and inside the oven. Photograph anything now mentioned in the inventory that either you've added in there or the landlord originally put in there. That's anything essentially that was worn or damaged or scratched or dirty. I'll take some zoomed out, just take a zoomed out photo in each room from each corner, and also your gas, electricity and water meter readings. That will then become your definitive inventory, and just ensure your photos are time stamped, because that's really helpful. Also photograph your keys, the gas safety and electrical safety certificates, and then you maybe even email everything to yourself if you wanted to. But when it comes to emailing the landlord, just email them just that definitive inventory as quickly as possible. So either type up your amends or submit the handwritten annotations, assuming that they are clearly legible. Back up your photos, keep them for your records, and then enjoy your new home. On the final day, then just repeat that process of photo taking, and again, back them up somewhere. Also photograph the keys to be returned and your gas, electricity and water meter readings, and then back up all of these photos. And on final day +1, call your deposit protection scheme, request the return of your deposit. They will advise you on what you need to do to start the return process. The landlord then has 10 days to specify what deductions they want, if any. And remember, it's key. If there's one thing you're going to take away from today's talk, I hope it's this: you are only required to leave the property in the same state it was at the start of the tenancy, after allowing for fair use or wear and tear. So, my bottom line here: adjudication is a valuable route for you. There is no guarantee of success, but adjudication all comes down to which side has the best evidence, and that is in your control. Follow the advice given today, and you should improve your chances of success against unreasonable deposit deductions. So that's everything I had on that section. So just before we finish, I just wanted to take a moment just to kind of explain what my company does, very briefly. So the company's called Get My Deposit Back. I'm a director of the company. And what we offer is basically a unique online renters platform for tenants, where the tenant can upload their tenancy agreement, their inventory, and all those photos that we talked about when they moved in, and when they move out again, and they can all be uploaded onto this platform. My platform will then look after your documents securely, and also provide independent verification of the date and time that they were uploaded. So if there's any dispute, oh, this photo wasn't taken on day one, it was taken at the end. If you've uploaded it to me, I can provide independent verification for you that no, that's the date and time it was uploaded to the platform. You will also then get a PDF evidence report, which you can provide to the adjudicator. And the idea of that is to make life easy for the adjudicator to see your evidence, I guess see what the relevant evidence that you've got, with nice before and after comparisons, because like I've hopefully made clear, evidence is so key in such matters. The platform will also coach you on how to take photos suitable for adjudication. The platform itself is to be delivered via a website, which is going to be launched later this month, and also a mobile app. We are on your side. I think I can say I'm biased towards tenants. I think I'm allowed to say that. I think there's plenty of organisations that are biased towards landlords, and I think what sets my company apart is that we are definitely on your side. So please do like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram, where you can get further advice, and I'll also be giving access to a special deal for Durham students on subscriptions to this new platform. Once it's up there, if you search for Get My Deposit Back on Facebook or on Instagram. You'll find me there. I think that's everything I had. So I just wanted to check, are there any comments or questions? I think we've got one in the chat to do with deposit protection. I can pick that one up after this talk today. If you maybe just want to pass, if you're okay with that, if maybe you can email Diana, and she will then pass on your email address to me, as long as you consent to that. Then I can help you with hopefully tracking down your deposit, but if not, on what to do to get that sorted for you. But yeah, just I'll give you guys a sec if you want to pop anything in the chat window. Same for the guys on YouTube. I'll let anything come through. Diana, if there's anything you want to ask me there. Or just say, if not, obviously, please feel free to contact me via Facebook or Instagram. My email address is also on the Facebook page, which is savingyourmoneylimited@gmail.com. But that's on the Facebook page as well. Okay, well, it's nearly 8:30, so I think I'll let you guys go. So sincerely, thank you to everyone in the USNOV GCR executive who has helped with today's talk, especially Diana and Faustino. I've really enjoyed today's talk, and I hope it's been useful. I will be running further similar talks this month. So if you've missed anything or would like a refresher, please look out for a catch-up session that will take place later this month. I'll let Diana know when that's going to be, and she can put it into your newsletter. Until then, thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your evening, guys. Take care.
Thank you, Matthew.